of course, as well. Richard Fuller is the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Conservative MP for North Bedfordshire. Richard Fuller, thanks so much for joining us this morning. I suppose just you and your party's reaction to what we're seeing in Syria. Of course, your gut party was in office pretty much when the Syrian civil war started back in 2011. So this has been a very, very long-running issue. Your reaction to what we're seeing in Damascus?
Well, you're quite right to say it's been going on for a very long time, and the terrible pain and hurt that the Syrian people have been put through. And I don't think anyone will shed any tears that the man who allowed his troops to use chemical weapons on children is now gone. But sadly, it looks like the situation there may get worse before it gets better.
In what way? What do you fear?
Well, this change has, I think, caught many people by surprise, the speed with which the rebel group or groups have made their advances. And it's not clear that there's a clear, stable government in the making yet. And often what happens when long-standing regimes fall is that we see people take their revenge. And that would be a very sad next step in Syria.
So you fear retribution in Syria in the coming days?
Well, I just fear all the uncertainty that is going to affect the people of Syria. So we can be hopeful. We can try and be hopeful, but there are lots of questions and lots of uncertainty. And of course, we will be in touch with the government. The Shadow Foreign Secretary will be in touch with the Foreign Secretary, and as usual, we will support the government, the British government, in their goals.
Do you think, in retrospect, now obviously this is going back some way, but obviously there was a great deal of exercise conversation in those years, 2012, 2013, about Western intervention in the Syrian civil war. And of course, we had the famous House of Commons vote, which decided not to do it. David Cameron wanted to do it, which led to Obama deciding not to do it. Does this perhaps show how brittle the Assad regime always was? Perhaps when we look back now, we might say, actually, if the West had taken action, he might have gone a long time ago.
Well, I was part of that vote. I was in the chamber, and I listened to the Prime Minister, David Cameron, and to Ed Miliband, who was then the leader of the opposition, basically make exactly the same points, exactly the same speech, and then walk into different sides of the lobbies. And as a result, the West did not intervene to try and control and restrict the horrendous actions of President Assad. Now, I can understand it was only 10 years on from the Iraq conflict, so why we would be sort of quite wary about getting involved. But I do think, my personal view is, if we had made the decision at that time, then many of the years of suffering in Syria would have been cut short. There would have been a more peaceful outcome earlier, and certainly less involvement by Russian troops in the region.
We're turning to British matters. You'll be aware that there is lots of speculation in the papers this morning about possible defections from your party to reform. Indeed, there is a sort of special conference press event being held early this week by Nigel Farage. Speculation about who that might be. Do you think that's likely?
No, I don't think that's likely. Nigel Farage likes to talk up a big game. He is the Reform Party. It's all about him, and he wants to keep in the headlines, and you're helping him today, and good luck to him in keeping himself in the headlines. But
so you're confident there'll be no defections this week? You're confident?
Well, I don't know. I'm not defecting to anyone. I'm a Conservative. I supported Brexit. I want the Conservative Party to be in government. I don't like what this Labour government is doing. They got a large majority at the last election, partly because people split their votes. Conservative-minded people split their votes between the Conservative Party and Reform. Since then, Mr. Farage has said his mission is to destroy the Conservative Party. That obviously puts him miles away from trying to understand what it takes to form a proper opposition to the Labour government, and then ultimately an offer to the electorate at the next election, which can get Conservative policy put in place again.
I mean, but it wouldn't be out of nowhere. We saw Tim Montgomery, of course, a very, very long-established, well-respected Conservative, founder of Conservative Home, or editor of Conservative Home, and so on, joined the Reform Party this week. The Mail is reporting today that Suella Braverman's husband is joining the Reform Party and speculating that she might not be long behind him. This is happening with some people, isn't it? There is an ongoing conversation that is happening, whether you think it will happen or not this week.
Well, obviously people have conversations, and I don't know what every single person is likely to do.
You must have regretted Tim Montgomery's departure.
Yeah, I don't know Tim well, to be honest, but I know he's been around for a while, and he's obviously got some reasons for those decisions. But you mentioned Suella. I saw her this week. We had a long conversation. We were talking about what we should be looking at, about rewiring the state under Kemi Badenoch and looking at the role of the economy on that, and Suella and I will be working together on that. So
you don't think that suggestion that she might be joining reform, you think that's wide off the mark?
It seems to be, yeah. Yeah, I would say so, based on my conversations with her this week, absolutely.
You'll have seen as well, obviously, speculation. I was asking the Deputy Prime Minister about it, about Elon Musk potentially giving money to reform. Do you think that the government ought to tighten our electoral laws to make sure that something like that couldn't happen? Would you consider it to be foreign interference?
Well, I wouldn't rush at a headline when someone says that Elon Musk is going to do something. I mean, he may or may not do it. I think it's always
he himself has been very positive about reform, about Farage.
Yes, maybe he has. I don't know. But I think if you want to looking at funding a political party, that's sort of one of those things to like PR that keeps coming around every 5 or 10 years. What people want is it's quite clear. The public do not want public funding. They want taxpayers to pay for politicians. But they do want absolute transparency on where money comes from. We do have a system like that. We have a good system that's transparent about it. So I would say let's stick with what we've got.
But even if it meant that Elon Musk, through a UK subsidiary, could funnel $100 million into our politics, we'll stick with what we've got. You'd be okay with that?
Well, $100 million. Well, $100 million would be an awful lot of money for one person to put through into any political party.
Small change for him, of course.
Well, yeah, yes, I suppose it is really. He's quite a wealthy man. But, we have large donations from trade unions that are well established. We have donations that are made to political parties through local volunteers. That's the way that politics is done. And I think maybe it may be to the detriment of the reform if they are seen to be taking money from
I bet they'd live with it for I bet they'd live with it for $100 million, Richard.
Well, that's kind of cheap, isn't it? Really, when you think you'd be selling yourself for $100 million. Would you sell yourself for $100 million?
Absolutely. Your leader in her speech in Washington this week said that she was excited. I mean, she's had positive words about Elon Musk, saying she's excited about DOGE. This is the fabled Department of Government Efficiency he's said to be setting up, and what President-elect Trump and Elon Musk will do on government efficiency. So we can take from that a Kemi Badenoch government should be doing similar sorts of things, should be cutting, well, the equivalent for the British government would be hundreds of billions of pounds of government expenditure. That's what we can look forward to.
So what I think is exciting about this period for politicians and political leaders is the great opportunities for improving the way in which public services are delivered using new technologies, but also giving people more control over the way in which they access those public services. And we'll get a lot of lessons from how the new administration under President Trump look at that issue, and that will help us in this country look at how we will be able to rewire the way government works in this country.
But potentially save hundreds of billions. That's something that a Kemi Badenoch type approach, that kind of laser-like approach to potentially save that sort of amount of money, that's what we might expect from a Badenoch government.
So I think I couldn't put a numbers on it because remember, a lot of public spending is issues like the state pension for people.
Exactly.
And other things. So those things aren't what I think is being looked at in America. And certainly when we look at rewiring the state, it's about the processes with which services are delivered, the way in which people can have more control using technology to access those needed services, not necessarily looking at those wider issues of benefits such as the state pension.
Right, okay, fine. Well, as Richard Fuller there, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Conservative MP for North Bedfordshire. You're listening to Sunday with Lewis Goodall on LBC coming up.